Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast, brought to you by Strava Craft Coffee. Strava CBD coffee is infused with CBD and CBG and can be delivered to your doorstep every 2, 4, 6, or 8 weeks, however frequently you need it. Their CBD-infused coffee has got me feeling great, particularly because it can help with all kinds of joint pains, chronic headaches, even IBS. Yes, it can help with all of those things and more, and they give you zero coffee jitters, which you can't beat that. And now when you go to Strava Craft Coffee, you can get 25% off with code DNVR25. I'm your host, Patrick Lyons, and joining me today, as he does every single week, and in good timing too, Mr. Goodman, it is Drew Goodman, voice of the Colorado Rockies for AT&T Sports, but you probably know him better for his Drew Goodman podcast. It's Drew Goodman.
With the millions of downloads every week, we appreciate all of you out there on the Drew Goodman podcast and the Drew Goodman podcast world. There's a little bit of baseball news in this period where we're kind of devoid of baseball news that is pleasant.
It was somewhat enjoyable yesterday going through the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft and learning about names of players who, if all things go well, they'll have a cup of coffee. But now we've got real things to talk about. Clint Hurdle is back with the Colorado Rockies. Was announced yesterday by Tracy Ringlesby that I believe starting January 1st, Clint Hurdle will be a special assistant to general manager Bill Schmidt. How exciting is that?
This has been in the works for a while. In fact, a couple of years ago, Clint had remained close with the organization, with Dick Monfort, and they had a number of conversations about, kind of creating a role. And it's obviously culminating with being a special assistant to Billy Schmidt. I think he's going to have his hand in a lot of areas. No, listen, Clint has great ties to the organization, number one, to the state of Colorado. And Clint's a friend. And I can tell you that when Clint jumps in, he doesn't stick a toe in. He jumps in and jumps to the bottom of the pool, and it's like, I'm all in. And this is a good thing because, Clint has a wealth of experience in the game from a personnel standpoint. He has great leadership characteristics. He has a big, literally and figuratively booming voice. And so it's another really well-respected baseball person in the room, but I think he'll be in a number of rooms. And I look at it as a really, positive thing. And you go back and you think about, I don't like using this term because we hope assume there's going to be, brighter days ahead and hopefully, one day competing for championships, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But the heyday so far, as you know, in the history of the Rockies was that 2007 period and the great run to the World Series, and Clint was on the top step of the dugout then.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say he has a big heart because we know he does.
He has an enormous heart. So this is beyond the Rockies organization. This is great for the community because Clint loves to raise awareness, whether it's for Prater Willie, which has afflicted, his daughter Maddie, and she's doing great. I talked to Clint recently about her, and or any number of charitable functions. Clint, as I used that phrase a little while ago, he'll be all in. And I think even though he's from Merritt Island, Florida, and up until a couple of years ago he was in Pittsburgh and he did a really good job with the Pirates. The Pirates were a terrible organization. They ended up becoming relevant and going to the postseason a couple of times.
Three years in a row, I believe, actually.
Right.
Wild card,
it doesn't matter.
They got that.
Yeah.
No, but I mean to
division.
Say they didn't get a chance to have a series, right? Because they got knocked out. I think they were up against Bumgarner twice and Jake Arrieta in his Cy Young year. But you're right. For a Pittsburgh team, a small market city like that, to do that for 3 straight seasons, it's pretty impressive.
Very impressive. And so, I was talking about geographically, but there's a big part of Colorado, for Clint and for Carla. I mean, they were dug in here, and so this is, when I texted him this morning, I said welcome home, because I know it feels that way for him.
Yeah, odd random story, and it's not a name drop because we're talking about Clint Hurdle. But when we had him in 2019 for the Sabre Banquet, the Society for American Baseball Research, got a really great chapter here in Denver. Had a fantastic Zoom event on Wednesday, and I actually got to pick him up from the airport. So it was him and Carla, and talking about their two kids, and talking about Maddie, and as a former teacher, I actually had a student who had Prader-Willi syndrome. And so that was kind of interesting, learning about that. And again, just how much the city means to him and his family. As you said, he's a guy who jumps in, he's all in when he does it. I think that's why it took so long for maybe a deal to get done. It wasn't right yet. He wanted to probably come back a year ago, right? Because there's, as you said, it's been in the works. We saw him at the All-Star game over the summer, which was great. He was here. I think he was in the building even for Larry Walker's number retirement, but he wasn't able to give it 100%. And so I'm not going to give anything yet. Now, as you said, he's going to be able to give that 100%.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I really do. I'm excited that it finally got done, and I do think as the Rockies kind of remake their front office, I think this again is a really positive step.
Yeah, so you got as a special assistant him, Vinny Castilla. Are there some other folks that you wouldn't mind seeing around? We knew that in spring training, sometimes guys will come back, just to coach during that month in February and March. Can you think of, are there some other people that are pivotal? And there's so many that are already around. Like you said, with that 2007 club, Ryan Spielberg's, Corey Sullivan, they're already at the ballpark every day. So I think you've got a lot of those. Anyone else that you could think of that would be a great fit? There's probably numerous people, and it might take the right situation. We'd all love Todd Helton to come back in some capacity. But are there some other people that you wouldn't mind seeing at some point down the line as a special assistant or in the organization in some way?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a full-on role necessarily, because you and I both know baseball is extremely time-consuming. And so there are guys that may want to be tangentially involved, but that's a whole different thing than, 24/7, 365, which baseball tends to be. So I think your question's a wonderful one. And I will tell you that I've always felt like the Cardinals, they do so many things right, and they embrace their history. Now, they have a long history. The Rockies' history is brief, certainly in comparison to an organization like the Cardinals. But they've always embraced the guys that played for them. And they strut them out, periodically during the season. They may not have some sort of large role, but, maybe it's showing up at spring training for, 3-4 days or a week. And you're going to share. I'm going to mention a couple of guys. One, Larry Walker, Hall of Famer. Bring Larry back, and he's been back before, but bring Larry back for a week in outfield instruction and just be around in uniform. And I know he's done that with the Cardinals. Who cares? So he played for a couple of organizations, or three, obviously, if you include the Expos. Same thing with Matt Holliday. When you talk about that period of time, Matt does stuff for the Cardinals. He's moved because he's working in college baseball. He's back in Stillwater. Matt had his swan song, if you will, his second tour, and his tip of the fedora was in a Rockies uniform. I'd love to see Matt, back involved. When you, as a young player, can walk around and go, man, there's a Hall of Famer, there's Larry Walker. Oh, Matt Holliday's in for a week in spring training. Juan Pierre does a lot of work still with the Marlins. I'd bring Juan Pierre back. Let him work with hitters on bunting, and drag bunt, the Garrett Hampsons of the world, the guys that, may utilize it. So yes, I would like to see more of that moving forward, even if it's on a week in spring training type of thing, or maybe it's in the middle of the season and they bring them in and they're in uniform and they're around the club. I think it's a positive thing on so many fronts, not only from an educational standpoint with the players, but when fans get to see them and other players as they come up, that you're embracing your history, that there's been a past, and there's been a lot of positives in that past, and these are guys that represent that.
Yeah, we see it with Vinny Castilla. At least, you and I do, especially if you're down in the field, because we've been in the clubhouse to see the interactions that a lot of the Latin American players in particular have with Vinny Castilla and how they feel like they're represented and the stories that they're able to share. And that impact can go such a long way. As you said with Holiday, when he came back in 2018, there's so many stories of players from that roster, how they benefited from essentially the coaching that Holiday did about, hey, look, the pitcher's throwing 90 plus miles an hour. All you got to do is meet the ball. You don't have to worry about your power numbers. The homers will come. That's something that a lot of the young players benefited from, is to hear that from Holiday, not just a coach that played 30, 40 years ago or whatever, and maybe doesn't have that same pedigree, but someone who, if we're talking about, a Ring of Fame or the Rockies' own Hall of Fame, Matt Holliday is going to be there. So that word and that advice that he provided, just like any of the guys you mentioned, I think they would go such a long way in helping with player development, amongst other things.
Yeah, and the name I was remiss in not mentioning, and you touched on it, the great job Vinny's done, but Cargo. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You got to bring Cargo back. I mean, he's adored maybe as much as anyone in the history of this franchise. We know how popular Carlos Gonzalez is. I mean, how great would that be during the season? A couple times you see, if you're a fan, you go to the ballpark and there's Cargo in uniform with that beautiful smile of his, and the benefit across the board, because he and Gerardo Parra, at least in my time, were the best. I don't want to call it a gap, but bridging, the two cultures of kids that grew up in Latin America and kids that grew up in North America. And he made, and there are a number of guys who can do this, but he made that clubhouse whole. And Gerardo was the same way. And so, yes, absolutely, bring back Cargo. But hopefully those are things that, happen more frequently in the future.
Yeah, we'd certainly love to see it. I know at some point there was some discussion over at McGregor Square of there being a little Hall of Fame or something. I know the Diamondbacks, they just had their own little Hall of Fame that opened on opening day 2019 when the Rockies opened up in Arizona. So there's tons of history here in Colorado.
Well, Patrick, you know this because you do this every day. This is the 30th year.
30th season, that's right.
This will be the 30th season.
That's right.
So, that's not an insignificant period of time. And I know that Dick Monfort wants to have a Hall of Fame. There's no better place, naturally, than McGregor Square. And it's not fraudulent in that, well, okay, we're going to try to create something here. You have had a number of great players. You don't have to be Cooperstown worthy to maybe make the Hall of Fame of a given club, right? I'll give you another name of somebody to bring back because he's such a great guy. He's a great communicator. He's really positive. We saw him this summer. We had him on our air. He's one of my all-time favorite Rockies as well, and that's Brad Hopp.
Oh, Hopper, yeah.
Yeah, Brad Hopp. I mean, have him in uniform. Have him talk about outfield play and getting behind the ball, throwing the baseball, standing around the cage, BSing with guys. He works in the off season. I know, Sam hit a home run last night down in the DR because he's playing winter baseball. Mm-hmm. But Brad and Sam Hilliard from the same neck of the woods, in the Fort Worth area, they're very close. Brad works with Sam and has for a number of off seasons. So, bring Hopper back.
Yeah, no, I'm all for that. Like that's something that we'll have to talk about, like that first class of Hall of Famers, because Patrick Saunders said something interesting again in our Sabre Zoom that we had on Wednesday, talking about how he's now going to have a Hall of Fame ballot. This will be his first year. Yep. He's been covering the Rockies for a lot longer than that, but the way that the Baseball Writers Association of America operates is it has to be 10 consecutive years. So he had a break in the chain there, needed to be an editor for the Denver Post, but he'll have his first vote and takes it very seriously. And the thing that he brought up, I think that does, get lost sometimes in the conversation of these players. And I think it's a fair point, and it's something I know I've kind of forgotten, is that fame part of players who've stuck around in one place for their entire career. Because, you don't have to get punished if you ended up getting traded or if you sign elsewhere for the betterment of your family or for the Players Association, whatever it may be. But those guys who stick around in one place for the entire time, how valuable that is and how special that can be. And so we know about that on just the Rockies community, but nationwide and for all of MLB, that's something that should help Todd Helton's campaign going forward here if the writers can think about it in that context.
Yes, I think, clearly the deeper dive, and I give a lot of your brethren at the local chapter, Sabre, credit. Manny was great in terms of carrying the torch, if you will, for the candidacy of Larry Walker and opening people's eyes nationally to take a close look at the numbers of Larry Walker and understand baseball at altitude, understand from a physical standpoint what it does. And I think that has helped Todd's candidacy enormously. I've said this before. I've said this with you, Patrick. I've said it on my own podcast. I've said it, on the street when people come up to me. Initially, I felt like Todd was Hall of Fame worthy when he retired back in 2013. But I felt like he was going to be really an uphill climb, like many people who follow Colorado baseball closely, because the bias against Coors Field was so significant. It's still there, but it's diminished to a certain degree in that there are people who have votes that are not just dismissive anymore of what took place and what does take place and have a better understanding of baseball at altitude. So, I still see it. I still, it's like with Trevor Story out there. Boy, the splits are really dramatic. No shit, pardon my language. They're always going to be dramatic. How about you then do a little homework and look at guys that left, like Matt Holliday, would be example number one, like DJ LeMahieu, prominent guys who had significant splits for the most part. The Walker famously in his 97 year actually had a higher OPS on the road in his MVP year. But look and realize that they level out once they leave altitude. So I get very frustrated, as you well know, when people don't do their homework. Yeah. And so long-winded, which I always am. Todd will make it to the Hall of Fame now, and I did not think that in 2013. It's not going to happen this year, but at some point in time, you and I are going to be sitting here, and we're going to give each other a high five. Not that we had anything to do with it, but that he's going to be the second Rocky to be enshrined.
I love it. We'll have to have a Breck Brew in Cooperstown too. When we're doing that, we'll have to have a tailgate, an official DNVR Rockies member tailgate. We do them for Broncos games. We've got one coming up this Sunday against the Detroit Lions. You can actually come down here to the bar at 10 a.m., get a ticket on the bus, on the shuttle, take you over to the stadium. All you can drink Breckenridge Brewery beer. We got some hard seltzers there as well. We've got the all-you-can-eat sexy pizza. Can't go wrong with that. It's one of the perks of being a member of the DNVR.com. Now just 50 cents for your first month. You also get a bigger beer when you're down here on the corner of Colfax and York. We've got happy hour specials from 3 to 6 every day, drink specials. So make sure you're tapping in on that when you subscribe to thednvr.com. And if you want the annual membership, because you already know what we're providing, you do get that free t-shirt. And we've got no issues with the supply chain here. We're stocked, we're locked and loaded. We'll make sure your gifts get to you in time for the holidays. Same thing can be true of Snooze Mattress. They're a new sponsor that we'd love for you to support. It's snoozesleep.com. They've got a Snooze Flip. That's the name of their 4-in-1 mattress. It's universal, and it's one that's designed to fit every body. It's soft, firm, cool, cozy. Flip it for whatever you desire, because we know mattresses, they may only last for 8 years or so, but your body is going to be changing over that time, for better or worse. Nevertheless, you've got those options. It's made by Colorado and designed for the world. And now when you use code DNVR, when you visit snoozesleep.com, you can receive $250 off a mattress and $250 off an adjustable base when using code DNVR over at snoozesleep.com. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL, and they've got an offer every football fan needs to jump in on. Right now, new customers can bet just $1 on either NFL team to score, and when they do, It's guaranteed lock here. You win $100 in free bets. It's fantastic. It's easy. It's rewarding. DraftKings also allows you to get skin in the game with same game parlays. So basically, the more legs you add from the same game, the bigger your payout is going to be. DraftKings is safe, secure, reliable, and best of all, you can withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code DNVR, and new customers can bet just $1 on either NFL team to score. And if they do, you win $100 in free bets. That's promo code DNVR this week on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. Colorado only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. How'd I do, Allie? Was that as quick as Ryan? I know he's the fastest on the draw for that ad read, so I got to step my game up there for a little bit. All right, for those that may not know a ton about our friend Clint Hurdle, they know, hey, he was at the helm in 2007 when the Rockies went to their only World Series. Just absolutely fantastic, that run. Tell some folks a little bit more about what Clint Hurdle has meant to the organization, or what he did in that 2007 season. You did it in your book, If These Walls Could Talk, which you had some help with Benjamin Hockman. But that's a fantastic book. For those who want to get a little taste of that, what was Clint Hurdle? How was he such a linchpin and the glue to bring together that incredibly special 2007 squad?
Well, I think that any great leader, is a unifier. And Clint is relentlessly positive and upbeat and optimistic. He had a good team, and he felt like he had a good team, and he let them run. And I think that also is a sign of a good leader, knowing what you have and kind of, opening the gate and letting the cattle go. And he was able to do that. But he was also able to keep it light at times when it was necessary. Famously, and you can read the story in the book, and I think many hardcore Rockies fans have heard some version of this, but when the Rockies won game 162 and Milwaukee defeated the Padres to force a game 163, the Rockies were, the next man up in the rotation was Josh Fogg. And he had the nickname Dragon Slayer because he had won big games against some big names earlier in the season, and he's a guy. And there's another guy to bring around because Fogger's such a fun person, and he's unassuming but great competitor and got the most out of mediocre stuff. And he'd tell you his stuff was probably less than mediocre. And the famous clubhouse meeting right after game 162 when the club knew they were going to play the next day against the Padres, and Jake Peavy, who won the Cy Young, was going, right? And Clint said, all right, we got the Dragon Slayer tomorrow, Josh Fogg, and Tulowitzki said, we got no effing chance. And the whole room broke up, and you know what? They played loose. And that's a byproduct of Clint, and I think one of the reasons that they went on that tremendous run the final couple of weeks of September of 2007 and made not only Rockies history, but some of the best sports memories, period, in our region were provided by that team.
Yeah, as you said, a lot of times the personality of a team can be similar to that of the manager, and that's what I'm most excited to see next season down on the field is when Clint's hanging around, the new players, the 2021 guys, like how that's going to bleed into them and the impact that positivity can have on them. Because we know regular season, 162 games can be a slog. And so you need that positive outlook. And having Clint around that team, the impact that he had in 2007, that can be palpable for next season as well for so many of these young guys.
Listen, money talks, but and the reason I preface what I'm about to say is that when this lockout ends, which it'll end at some point, and we all have our fingers crossed it's sooner rather than later. Yeah. I don't think it's pre-Christmas, certainly. It's probably going to walk up and dance with the start of spring training, because we know to get two sides together there has to be some things at risk on both sides.
Tick tock.
Right. I mean, it's got to be 11:59 and 58 seconds. So it'll get done. But there's going to be a feeding frenzy. Patrick, you've talked about it on your podcast. We've talked about it collectively. And you can't negotiate anymore if you're a general manager. If you want the services of a player who's a free agent, it's going to go quick. And you have to reveal your absolute best hand. And in the case of the Rockies, maybe they have to overpay a little bit because they're not looked upon right now as one of those organizations. They feel like they can contend next year, but I don't know if most of the industry, sees it that way. I've said this before. I've said this with you. Toronto now all of a sudden has put themselves up here. We know where the Dodgers and the Yankees typically are. So if they make an offer, at the end of the day, typically money wins out. But also in the recruiting process, Clint knows everyone in the game.
Yeah.
He knows agents. He knows players because he's not that far removed from when he was a manager. So there's another guy that can help recruit. I understand money at the end of the day is going to be the determining factor most often. But I think he can help in that regard also.
And it sounds like he might be working a little bit with player development. And we know that right now the Rockies farm system is definitely on the rise. And, with the success that they had through both levels of A, high A, low A, and going to the postseason, we know that the Rookie Complex League and then down in the Dominican Summer League, they were
They had
champions.
a great year down in the DSL.
And so for anyone, again, as you said, if you're not paying attention, people were paying attention in 2018 and 2019. It was hard to ignore consecutive postseasons for the Rockies. And so, yeah, people were starting to notice around that time frame. But you're right. Right now, you just go, they lost John Gray, they lost Trevor Story, and they don't see that potential there. Especially with the starting rotation, especially with the young guys that are on the come up. And so to your point, Hurdle's going to do a good job. Money's going to talk, but you might be able to sell a few guys, and that could tip the scales a little bit and say, all right, so this year nothing's guaranteed, but each year going forward now, the odds are going to get better and better and better with the young pitching staff still kind of coming into their prime. The guys in the minor leagues and the lower levels are going to be there either on the field or as valuable trade chips. Hurdle can do a good job to sell that to any free agents out there.
I think that's part of it. Again, I think the number one criteria is always the bottom line financially. But I do think Clint will assist in that regard, and I think just having him around, and we'll see how it plays out. How frequently is he bouncing around on the field or in the dugout area, because he's entertaining. Buddy's entertaining, and with Clint, and I know he's not going to be around just to step on people's toes. That's not his intent. But some of the greatest laughs I've had over 20 plus years in the game have been, lines that Clint has delivered. I remember when Barry Bonds was going great, and he was otherworldly, and Clint said, "Yeah, the Rockies are getting ready to play the Giants." And Clint said, "Yeah, he keeps this up, he's going to get called up, to the next league."
Yeah.
Right. But one of his favorite lines, and I don't know if this was a Clint original or if it was a Jamie Quirk, who was his right-hand guy as bench coach, if it was Jamie's line, but I remember Clint delivering it quite a bit about, this isn't the try-hard league, this is the do-good league. The kid that came up and had a lot of potential and was working his tail off, as you'd think anybody would, but wasn't having results. And, ultimately, he goes, not the try-hard league, it's the do-good league.
Did Clint and Bud ever overlap with Kansas City? I'm not sure if they did. They may have just missed each other.
Yeah, I know they know each other, obviously.
Because Clint was famously on the cover of Sports Illustrated as the next big thing in prospect, kind of a slightly older version of Bryce Harper, so to speak, tabbed in the late 70s there. And Bud, of course, made his earnings there with Kansas City. So I'm not sure if they did overlap. Might have been.
That's another great Clint story. I won't retell it. It's in my book, in the chapter that we wrote with Clint. And the day he found out that he was on the cover and how he found out that he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated in the 70s, because that was a completely different time frame on how one, got information. And that is a classic story.
Yeah, if you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated, that was worth like a blue check mark on Twitter, 5 million followers, on TikTok, whatever it is. Like that was the
There was
be-all
nothing bigger.
Nothing.
There was nothing bigger in sports in terms of sports media. There was no Sports Center. There was no
Not
top
yet.
10 plays.
That's right.
You are on the cover, and that was the holy grail. That was the Bible of sports.
Yeah.
Back then, and great writing and great photography. I couldn't wait for my Sports Illustrated to arrive every week, and I read that thing cover to cover, as I know you did growing up. And Clint was on the cover. Man, if you were on the cover, I mean, enormous.
There's nothing like that today. Like there's absolutely nothing. I'm big into stand-up comedy, and I listen to a lot of comedians and their podcasts and interviews. And there was a time where if you got on Johnny Carson, that was huge. And then if you got called over to the couch, boom, you were golden. And now there's not necessarily anything like that in the comedy world. There's a couple things close, but nothing compared to 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe even early 2000s being on the cover of a Sports Illustrated. It's so much cachet.
Yeah, and it's just funny when you go and read and you'll love that story. And it'll kind of make you chuckle thinking, wow, that's how he found out? Because it seems so foreign to learn of something of that magnitude in today's world, how you would learn of such a thing.
And his teammates' reactions, too.
Oh, it was priceless,
That you got to check it out. Yeah. If These Walls Could Talk. Stories of... what's the next part?
Stories from the Rockies, dugout. And
holidays are coming up. Yeah. Holidays are coming up. Make sure you get that. Make sure if you need
it's evergreen, man. We wrote it a couple
of
years ago, but it definitely has shelf life.
Oh yeah. You got information in there about a couple trades that Larry Walker maybe could have been a part of, and you can speculate. Oh, what would have happened if they did this, that, and the other? Yeah. So many great, fantastic behind.
I appreciate the plug. Hit me up, on Twitter or whatever, and I will. I'll autograph one and send it in your direction.
Love that. If you need to get some other holiday gifts, get like some food, Hassel Cattle Company is going to be the way you go. We brought you damn good beer in Breckenridge Brewery. Well, this is damn good beef. It's so good that you can get Hassel Cattle Company beef right here at the DNVR bar. It's on our menu. You can have it at home when you go to HassellCattleCompany.com, HASSELL, cattlecompany.com, and they're hooking you up with a special holiday discount right now of 15% off your entire purchase when you use code DNVR15 at checkout at HassellCattleCompany.com. We love saving you money, and we love companies that are trying to save the world. That's why we partnered with Ball Aerospace and Technology, because they've been practicing diversity for years, while other major companies have just talked about it as a workplace idealism. At Ball, you're free to be your authentic self. And right now, they're hiring folks that have technical and mechanical skills to help them manufacture aluminum cans and bottles. They're hiring at over $27 an hour with raises at 6, 12, 18 months, 401k, comprehensive insurance, the day of hire. It's fantastic. They're an iconic brand. They're doing big things, and they want you to be a part of that big thing as well. So text Golden to 77222 and you'll get linked to all their open positions, or you can go directly to jobs.ball.com and search for Golden. It's holiday season, as we said, and if you don't know what to get somebody as a gift or stocking stuffer, and you've already done the Hassel Cattle Company, you've already gotten If These Walls Could Talk by Drew Goodman, maybe you even got it autographed, you can also check out Manscaped. Yes, they've got the tools to guarantee that you're going to win this year's stocking stuffer or white elephant competition, whatever it may be. It's called the Performance Package, and inside, all kinds of great gifts for you if you want to be the ballsiest gift giver this holiday season with Manscaped. Use code DNVR right now to get free shipping and, more importantly, 20% off. All right, goodie. Also, over the weekend, we had some pretty cool news that kept us hydrated and had a lot of nutrients for us for a couple days. The Hall of Fame had a couple committees get together, and we've got 6 new members of Baseball Hall of Fame. Gil Hodges, Jim Cott, Minnie Minoso, Tony Oliva, Bud Fowler, who played for the Pueblo Pastimes right here in Colorado. Love that connection.
Bud Fowler was from
Pre-Negro Leagues.
Cooperstown originally.
That too, which I think they're one of the streets right outside of Cooperstown is Fowler Way. And probably the most famous, at least to some, Buck O'Neill, the sixth and final member of that Hall of Fame class.
Do you know on a, I don't know how I would phrase this, but I was pleased for all of those folks. And several are no longer with us, obviously. But I was particularly pleased for Buck O'Neill, who I had the pleasure and the honor of meeting on a couple of occasions, who did so much not only on the field clearly, but in advancing the history of the Negro Leagues and the roles played by so many that people have heard of. When you talk about, naturally it begins with Jackie Robinson, the Larry Dobies of the world, but many that you perhaps were unaware of. And the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City, which is a must-see for any baseball fan, for any American. And so I was particularly pleased that Buck O'Neill was honored, as he should have been. So that's wonderful. And growing up, as you and I did back east, and being Mets fans, and my first, I guess, coming of age was watching the great run of the '69 Mets, overcoming the deficit against the Cubs, and then their run ultimately through the Baltimore Orioles in 5 games in the '69 World Series. And their manager was Gil Hodges, who was, by all accounts, just a wonderful gentleman and a great leader. I still follow some older Mets, Art Shamsky, and they rave about the kind of human being that Gil Hodges was and the kind of leader he was. But let's not forget, he was also a terrific player in a Dodger uniform, a great player. So those two really stood out. Now, if you're from Minnesota, and Tony Oliva goes in, Kitty Cott, who pitched forever, literally, right?
25 years,
and then did so much on the broadcasting end. Great, awesome Minnie Minoso. So in itself, that the Veterans Committee, what a wonderful group that is now added, and a guy that I don't know very well at all, but have great respect for his journalism and following the game and writing about the game, Tim Kirkjian.
Yeah, that was one that came out, I think it might have been Tuesday, where he was selected there for a Ford C. Frick award, I believe. Mm-hmm. No, I think it was J.G. Taylor Spink.
The Taylor Spinks, the writer's wing.
Yeah, which they may have even renamed. But yeah, it's fantastic. It's, there's kind of similarities between Kirkjian and Buck O'Neill, much more so for Buck O'Neill. But, as you're talking about Buck O'Neill, it makes me think about how to put, what Buck O'Neill has meant to the Negro Leagues into some kind of context, because, Jackie Robinson was the first, right? Broke the color barrier. Not the first African-American. There were others before that. The Moses Fleetwood Walker and his brother Mewelde Walker played professionally, but then Cap Anson, who's in the Hall of Fame. We can talk about that on another time, or if he should be out or whatever. But he was the one who put a foot down and said, we're not going to have that anymore. And, we have to wait until 1947. So Jackie Robinson, the first one to break the color barrier for African Americans, but he wasn't the best. He was just the right man for the job. And so that kind of starts moving along and going forward. And then, it really isn't until Ken Burns' baseball that there is this newfound love affair, or at least appreciation of the Negro Leagues, where you've got Buck O'Neill and this 1,000-watt smile talking about the guys that he played against, and also talking about the segregation and the racism that he faced, and bringing that to light more, because, frankly, there wasn't a lot known. The Negro Leagues hadn't been played in 35, 40 years by that point of the documentary. So there wasn't people really talking about it too much. And he helped kind of bring that back into the spotlight in a major way. He didn't just talk about it. Other people talked about it. If you go back and watch Baseball by Ken Burns, but he talked about it in such a way and had the credentials and enough to make you understand, wow, there's a big piece of baseball history that we need to go back and acknowledge and do a better job of understanding.
Yeah, and that's, there's so many facets of the game of baseball that I love and adore, but also, baseball has at times, mirrored where we are as a country and the mistakes we've made as a country and the advancements we've made as a country. And that's another thing that you learned with one of the great documentarians ever in Ken Burns, great and lengthy history of baseball.
Yeah. Yeah. Did a documentary on the Civil War.
Yes.
Did one on jazz. I think he's done a couple since then, but
yeah,
just fantastic. And that documentary, I don't think would have been what it is without Buck O'Neil. So it's great. He's finally in the Hall of Fame. And are you going to the Negro League Hall of Fame, or excuse me, the Negro League Museum anytime soon that you know of?
Not that I know of. Are you looking at me like maybe I'm not looking?
You may be. Colorado goes to Kansas City this year.
You know what?
How about that?
Excuse me.
Yeah, they travel to Kansas City.
Then there's a very good chance I will, because
That'll be exciting.
You know what? I usually know the schedule backwards and forwards, but I have to be honest, because of COVID last year and we didn't travel.
Yeah.
And we're finally scheduled to travel again. I usually scrutinize that thing and say, oh, wow, you got an off day in New York, got an off day in Washington. Oh, cool, we haven't been to Detroit in a while, going to Detroit. And so I haven't looked at that schedule and really broken it down, because when it came out, we were still in the midst of doing road games from our studio. So that's awesome. So you're right. In the next 6 months, maybe you'll be on the road with us, and you and I will go down there. Because listen, without question, I will be there, because we'll have 3 days from which to make our way to the museum. So that'll be
exciting. And I'll let you pick up the tab for barbecue too. I hear barbecue is pretty good in Kansas City.
Barbecue's good. I will pick up that tab. I know you and you know me, and we're gonna go and run. You're gonna run further than I will, but to work it off.
Is there a river trail in Kansas City?
They're down in the what's the name of that area that we stay? It's it's kind of the hip area. But you can run on it's kind of a man-made waterway down there. But there's also a park up. I'll show you. I got you taken care of.
Appreciate
park where there was a Civil War battle.
Civil War battle in Kansas City?
Not yet.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Learn something.
Yeah.
And learn something.
There you go.
I have in my collection, having gone to Cooperstown many times, one of my most prized pieces of memorabilia is an autographed photograph of Buck O'Neil, who at the time I didn't quite revere like I did today. I think I was much younger. I was like maybe 12. And that's something I value and cherish. And it's to him. Would have loved it if he was wearing his Kansas City Monarchs uniform. He was wearing a Cubs hat for when he was coach, first African American as a coach. Helped sign Ernie Banks. Just a fantastic human being, a Buck O'Neil. So that made me think, what in your collection do you love the most of items that you've had, either that was given to you or that you've bought?
I will answer that question by telling you I've really not done a great job of collecting.
Your memorabilia is up in your head. You've got all the stories.
Sure, a little bit. That
makes sense.
I've never been a big autograph person. Now that's not to say I don't have. I have some baseballs that Tom Seaver, Hall of Fame guy, Joe Morgan,
Mackie Sasser,
Hall of Famers. on there. I have a jersey that a 32 Dodger jersey framed that was, it's autographed by Sandy Koufax. So I would probably be, near the top of the shelf. My dad, who passed about 7 months ago, worked the press gate in 1951 at the Polo Grounds, and he has books. And back then, a good buddy of mine who's a huge Rockies fan. He's from back east. Went to a million fantasy camps. My buddy Kevin Keating, and he's an expert on he's an authenticator and so on. And back then, what people did when they got an autograph to preserve it, they thought the best way to preserve it was put Scotch tape over it. So my dad has. He has Ted Williams autographed like 15 times. He has DiMaggio.
Wow.
He has all Willie Mays. He has a baseball from the '51 Giants with Mays and DeRocher and and Bobby Thompson, all those folks on there, right? And so he has a lot of those, and I now have them, in my possession. People have said, "Man, that's got to be worth a ton of money," but so many of the autographs I said had the tape over it, which unfortunately devalued it. But intrinsically, more importantly. So that's that's kind of the stuff I have.
Yeah, I have tons of baseball cards from the late '80s, early '90s. They're worthless, but they mean the world to me. So I don't plan on getting rid of them, even if they were expensive. That wouldn't matter. Have you thought about if you could have a piece of memorabilia? What would it be? Like, you just kind of make a grand wish. Maybe it's something with the Polo Grounds tied to your father. Something out there that, regardless of the cost, what was something you'd like to have?
Wow, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one I've never really thought much about. That's a great
So
one.
I feel like so much of memorabilia is just kind of kept away in a closet or a box. And so if you're going to get something, you maybe want to see it.
I have one I just thought of. And again, these are not. I bought this for my dad, and I think I bought it through my buddy Kevin Keating. A photo of Willie Mays with his back at the Polo Grounds, back to the infield, catching the drive in the World Series that Vic Wertz hit. Was it '54 World Series, I believe? And in making that catch over his head, and it's autographed by Mays, and obviously it's a black and white photograph. Pretty cool. In fact, you just reminded me that I'm going to. I have to find a place in the house to put that one up.
That's a good one. I've got a brick from Coors Field. My uncle and cousin from down in Colorado Springs, they helped build Coors Field, did some of the electrical work and inside the old building. That's another one of those interesting fun facts that people may not realize, and depending on the word choice you use, it can make it fictional, if you will. But that part of Coors Field is actually older than Wrigley Field, right? Out in right field on the corner of whatever that would be, Blake and 19th,
in right field.
perhaps.
No, it would be 22nd Street.
Yeah, 22nd. So the Student Movers building, essentially, was built before Wrigley Field, and so they incorporated that into right field. And so anyway, I've got a brick that was used, one of the lighter sand colored one, and it's got the little stamp in it, so it does say Coors Field on it.
Do you know, we bought, when Coors Field was being built, we bought on the walkway there, which is now right by McGregor Square. We bought a brick as a family. Well, actually, we bought a brick before we had family because we didn't have kids then. But and I have no idea where it is, and I'm trying to remember if I ever saw it. I think I probably must have seen it at some point, but I have no idea where it is. On the layout.
If you see it, take a picture of it, send it into at Drew Goodman 42 on Twitter. It's got to be there somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody can help me out. Someone staring down.
I would think a cool piece of memorabilia would be a seat from a stadium, right? Somewhere. I think I even saw somewhere, I was looking around for fun, not like, I've got money to blow, but it was a purple seat from when they did renovations up in the party deck. There's not too many of those, from there. And,
yeah, that's cool.
They
That's
still have
nice
the original seating. That would be something neat.
Do you have one of those? Or
I do not, no.
Okay. I have.
I'll have to give you my address so you can get it to me in time, if that's what you're saying.
I was
what you're
absolutely.
suggesting?
Yeah, actually, you blew it. I had already purchased it, but
I'll act surprised.
Yeah, it's no. Yeah, well, I'll have to give it to somebody else now.
But a polo ground seat would, might
Would
be
probably
a
be
nice
less
little piece.
comfortable than the purple seat.
It would be
newer model.
Yeah, no, it would have to be pretty tight.
Yeah.
For that. Yeah, I had another question about memorabilia too. About ultimately, like, would you rather a baseball signed or a flat picture? I mean, you said you've got the Mays that's autographed.
I'll tell you because you jogged my memory. For me, photos are, especially because I've been very privileged to do what I do and fortunate to do what I do. I think one of my prized possessions, because I'm not a big collector and I'm not into idolatry, quite frankly, but they're people you have great respect for and you understand. Right. So it's neat. Just a little like there was a picture of Clint and I think it was during fantasy camp once, and so it's funny because we're both in uniform, right? and Clint wrote me a really personal and nice message on there, and I have that framed in my office. The one I was alluding to though was I have a couple from Vin Scully, in a picture with the two of us, and just a very warm, salutation, if you will, from the greatest to ever do it. And, I don't play. I'm a broadcaster. And so having that, and I have that framed and a couple of them up in my office, and that, that's pretty cool.
Oh, I'd agree. I think my favorite story for people who have memorabilia was when they were tearing down Tiger Stadium. So, we know Vin Scully now, and he's on Twitter as well. I'm not sure how much he's on there, but people from this generation know him, even if they've never heard a game called by him, because he just kind of transcends, and he's still there. He's still ever present. But Ernie Harwell, who was kind of in that class too. And so they were tearing down Tiger Stadium. They asked Ernie Harwell, what do you want? Pick anything that you want from the stadium. I think, I want to say Johnny Damon got like the foul pole at the old Yankees stadium, a bunch of random things.
Where do you put a foul pole up, by the way?
I don't
put that
know.
In the middle of your living room and go up 7 stories?
Catwalk? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But Ernie Harwell thought about it long and hard, and he said, I want the urinal in the visiting team's locker room. And he said that because he said all the greatest American League hitters for decades have used that urinal. And so he got it. He put it in his wife's garden, put some plants in there, made it look all nice, jazzed it up.
Is that right?
And I think that's the right call, right? Because what do you actually want?
I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think I wouldn't be thinking about a urinal, but maybe that's why he was as great as he was. That's deep thinking.
Either that,
a lot of guys, utilize that urinal.
Utilize is
I remember, it's kind of eerie. Real quick, Tiger Stadium thing. Tiger Stadium it took them a while to tear it down, and we know the city of Detroit's had a lot of issues through the years. There's a lot of vacant buildings, and for a number of years the Tiger Stadium was vacant.
Yeah.
And I would, on the occasion that the Rockies played in Detroit, and there was a period where they played there twice, and it seemed like 4 or 5 years we were there, and I would run by there. Because you and I, again, we've talked about this, we both like to run, and I look at it when I'm in visiting cities. I have my favorite runs, but it's sightseeing, right? So I would run by there, and it was kind of eerie because honestly, Patrick, before they ripped it down, it's like they put fencing, how they do when a building's,
construction zone,
right, no longer going to be in use, and it's getting ready to be raised, that sort of thing. They put the fencing around, locked the gate, and I'm telling you, it's like whoever the Tigers played in that final home game at Tiger Stadium, they left that day and locked it up, and nobody ever walked in there again. It was really eerie. I mean, it looked like there were still hot dog wrappers blowing around. Usually if something gets shut down and they're preparing it to be demolished, you have a sense of that. You were like, man, they haven't played here in whatever it was, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and it looked like, yeah, there was a game here, recently, and they just left, and there's weeds growing up. It was, as I said, it was kind of eerie.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how close that was to the time when they filmed 61. Because I know Billy Crystal used Tiger Stadium as sort of a stand-in for Yankee Stadium. Because you think, at least in certain parts, there was kind of some similarities between Tiger Stadium and, I guess, the original iteration of Yankee Stadium. Because, of course, they had the major renovations in the late 70s, and so it looked a little bit different. But I know that Tiger Stadium was at least, used for that. So
I went to one game at Tiger Stadium. I was shooting a show. We used to do this show called the Big Ten Report, and I was doing it with a gentleman by the name of Jim Brandstatter, who remains the voice of the Michigan Wolverines. Been there forever. He played at Michigan. His partner's Dan Deerdorf now, two former Michigan offensive linemen. But anyhow, I was doing the show with Jim Brandstatter, and we finished shooting in Ann Arbor, and we were flying out the next day. So I, drove down with the producer, a guy by the name of Sam Allen at the time, and we got tickets at Tiger Stadium. Jack Morris pitched that night, and I understood what they meant by there's obstructed view seats, because I was seated right next to. If I was one seat over, there would be a pole, like kind of you'd have to be doing this, the whole game to watch. And you saw the overhang in right field. I mean, it was neat stuff. I'm glad I got to at least go to one ball game there.
I did not. Comerica Park. That's it. I missed out on Tiger Stadium. That's a good one.
Comerica's a good park.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Drew Goodman's got Fran Fraschilla on the podcast this week. Back-to-back college basketball guest. Nico Medved from last week.
Yeah, and Fran's so good. And we talked at length about, not only the programs here in state with Colorado and Colorado State, and, Joe Scott's doing a good job down at Air Force Academy as well, but talked about the national picture and talked about a lot of interesting things, and he's a wealth of knowledge. So we're actually going to do it over a couple of parts. I talked this week also about Jay Norvell, who Colorado State just hired, and I know you guys were all over it on the DNVR, Rams podcast as well. But definitely I had some significant thoughts, I think, on Coach Norvell, a guy I got to know a little bit doing some Nevada games over the years. I think it's a winning hire for Colorado State. I think it's a great hire, but we'll talk about that, some other doings in college football, touch a little bit on what's going on in baseball as well. So, thanks for the plug.
Yeah, no, I thought it was fantastic. Again, for anyone that's not aware of, Jay Norvell, but you do a good job of kind of highlighting his background and how CSU is such a good fit with the facilities and so many other things that you go on to detail. So, last week and this week with Fran Fraschilla, absolute bangers, as us kids say, I guess. And so, that's drops today on Thursday. So if you're listening to the podcast, of course, you can get that. Make sure you download the Drew Goodman podcast and subscribe to that. Subscribe to the DNVR Rockies podcast as well. He's at Drew Goodman 42 on Twitter. You can reach out to him. And I'm Patrick D. Lyons on Twitter, our account at DNVR_Rockies. Thanks so much for joining with us. This has been fun. Make sure you're tuning in next week. Subscribe to the DNVR.com, even if you just want that bigger beer. I mean, that's going to pay for the price of subscription alone, of course. So for DNVR Sports, Drew Goodman, Patrick Lyons, thanks for tuning in to DNVR Rockies.